A mysterious infection spanning the globe in a climate of secrecy. The rise of Candida auris embodies a serious and growing public health threat. Drug-resistant germs. Here we have what looks like a close-up image of what is, my understanding, is a fungal infection that can't be cured. Now, the initial reporting comes from the New York Times, but the New York Times is a bit verbose, so I'm going to read the first paragraph and then jump to the Daily Wire's got a summary. Last May, an elderly man was admitted to the Brooklyn branch of Mount Sinai Hospital for abdominal surgery. A blood test revealed that he was infected with a newly discovered germ as deadly as it was mysterious. Doctors swiftly isolated him in the intensive care unit. The germ, a fungus called Candida auris, preys on people with weakened immune systems, and it is quietly spreading across the globe. Over the last 5 years, it has hit a neonatal unit in Venezuela, swept through a hospital in Spain, forced prestigious British medical center to shut down its intensive care unit, and taken root in India, Pakistan, and South Africa. Recently, C. auris reached New York, New Jersey, and Illinois, leading to the Federal Center for Disease Control and Prevention to add it to a list of germs deemed urgent threats. The man at Mount Sinai died after 90 days in the hospital, but C. auris did not. Tests showed it was everywhere in his room, so invasive that the hospital needed special cleaning equipment and had to rip out some of the ceiling and floor tiles to eradicate it. Everything was positive. The walls, the bed, the doors, the curtains, the phone, the sink, the whiteboard, the poles, the pump, said Dr. Scott Lauren, the hospital's president. The mattress, the bed rails, the canister holes, the window shades, the ceiling, everything in the room was positive. C. auris is so tenacious, in part, because it is impervious to major antifungal medications, making it a new example of one of the world's most intractable health threats, the rise of drug-resistant infections. Now here's where it gets scary. The story goes on later and points out that under a deal with the CDC, they cannot disclose where these infections are. What was that game, The Last of Us, where everyone turned into zombies because of a fungal infection? Well, we're not looking at a zombie apocalypse, but this is actually some pretty scary stuff. Now, I may jump back to this because we have some photos and stuff, but the Daily Wire has more of a kind of like straight bullet points. I guess we can call this kind of like the Cliff Notes, if you will. Frightening drug-resistant infection cropping up around the world. Crazy story. And this is once again by Ash Scow, who I'm gonna give a shout out real quick too, because I do read a lot of Ash's articles. I did yesterday. So she's it's ASHESCHOW. Just because I read so many of Ash's articles, I think it would be fair to give a shout out because she's the one doing the writing. Across the world, a new drug-resistant infection has appeared. And the New York Times reported on it, and then we go to that quote. Reports of C. auris have come from Venezuela, Spain, Great Britain, India, Pakistan, etc. We read that stuff. The Centers for Disease Control said it identified 51 clinical case patients and 61 screening case patients in New York alone. The CDC reported 45% of the clinical case patients died within 90 days. Now, that may be scary. We'll read on a little bit. But now I'm going to freak you out a little bit more. There's common STDs, the clap, which is what I think gonorrhea and chlamydia, and they're becoming incurable. Because of the rapid spread, they're mutating and they're becoming drug resistant. My understanding, not an expert, not a doctor, my understanding though is that it's everybody. They don't finish their antibiotics. So the doctors give a medicine, and again, I'm using STDs because it's kind of freaky, but this is true of all diseases. The doctors will say, here's like 10 pills, take all 10. People will take like 5 and then go, I'm cured, I feel great, and they'll stop. Sometimes it comes back drug resistant. Other times they spread it to somebody and then it comes back later and they go, oops, because you got to make sure you finish off what your doctor tells you to do. So this is what's getting scary. Apparently, like something's happening in New York. I read an article about it. Williamsburg is a huge problem. Interestingly, Williamsburg is the hipster neighborhood. But let's read on. In the same study linked above, 98% of the clinical case patients were resistant to fluconazole, which is used to treat serious fungal infections such as meningitis. The strength and resistance of the infection led the CDC to deem C. auris a serious threat and said it infected 3,400 and caused 220 deaths per year. The CDC also reported that the median age for the clinical case patients was 72, but that the ages of those infected ranged from 21 to 96 years. Wow. That means if we're talking about 21, if you're in your late 20s to early 30s, this is when you're usually safe and you don't got to worry about dying from the flu. But apparently, it's not the case. 51% of those infected were male. Oh, great. 48% of the population, but 51% of the infections. And all patients had serious concurrent medical conditions, such as needing mechanical ventilation or central venous catheters or gastrostomy tubes. Sorry, I don't know. So, but it does sound like it's only really hitting people who are already sick. Infections like C. auris have been able to thrive due to the overuse of antibiotics, Times reported. Such overprescribing has reduced the effectiveness of the drugs, allowing once curable bacterial infections to thrive once again. Now fungal infections are becoming resistant. Naturally, those most at risk of these superbugs are newborns and the elderly, who generally have weaker immune systems. Well, let's pop back over to the New York Times, read through some more. I wanted to give like a quick version, right? That's why I like the Daily Wire, but we'll get into the weeds a little bit. So back over the story, we have this image. And it says, Dr. Sean Lockhart, a fungal disease expert at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, holding a microscope slide with inactive Candida auris collected from an American patient. Freaky. They say, for decades, public health experts have warned that the overuse of antibiotics was reducing the effectiveness of drugs that have lengthened lifespans by curing bacterial infections once commonly fatal. But lately, there's been an explosion of resistant fungi as well, adding a new and frightening dimension to a phenomenon that is undermining a pillar of modern medicine. Now, a lot of people don't understand how serious this issue is. People say like, oh, okay, so then look, don't get sick, right? Don't have unprotected sex. However, when we're doing organ transplants, they cut your body open and boom, you're infected. They need tons of antibiotics after they, close you back up after surgery, like appendicitis, right? We got to remove your appendix. If bacteria becomes antibiotic resistant, what do we do? Now there is some developments. There's some really interesting developments, different strategies in stopping. One of them, I don't know. I'm not a microbiologist or a disease specialist. But one thing I read is that they're trying to restrict the bacteria from expressing, they release like a protein that signals other cells, other bacteria, so they can start reproducing. And there's like other ways to deal with bacterial infections and fungal infections without destroying them, just tricking them into like kind of destroying themselves. But we'll read on. It's an enormous problem, said Matthew Fisher, a professor of fungal epidemiology at Imperial College London, who was a co-author of a recent scientific review on the rise of resistant fungi. We depend on being able to treat those patients with antifungals. Simply put, fungi, just like bacteria, are evolving defenses to survive modern medicines. Yet even as world health leaders have pleaded for more restraint in prescribing antimicrobial drugs to combat bacteria and fungi, convening the United Nations General Assembly in 2016 to manage an emerging crisis, gluttonous overuse in hospitals, clinics, and farming has continued. That's the other thing. We are pumping animals, cows and chickens full of antibiotics. I'm pretty sure you can buy non-antibiotic beef and stuff like that, but it's instead of letting the cow get sick, they're like, give them antibiotics. Well, over time, the antibiotic doesn't kill off everything always, or they don't give it like I mentioned earlier, you don't get enough antibiotics, it comes back. Well, now, man, think about how crazy it's going to be. A world without antibiotics. It's going to send us back 100, 200 years. Scientists say that unless more effective new medicines are developed and unnecessary use of antimicrobial drugs is sharply curbed, risk will spread to healthier populations. A study the British government funded projects that if policies are not put in place to slow the rise of drug resistance, 10 million people could die worldwide of all such infections by 2050, eclipsing the 8 million expected to die that year from cancer. And then they have this nice little photo of Dr. Johanna Rhodes, an infectious disease expert. And she's just, here, New York Times, sit down, we'll take a picture of you. In the US, 2 million people contract resistant infections annually, and 23,000 die from them, according to the official CDC estimate. That number was based on 2010 figures. More recent estimates from researchers at Washington University School of Medicine put the death toll at 162,000 worldwide fatalities from resistant infections. They say worldwide fatalities are estimated at 700,000. Antibiotics and antifungals are both essential to combat infections in people, but antibiotics are also used widely to prevent diseases in farm animals. And antifungals are also applied to prevent agricultural plants from rotting. Some scientists cite evidence that rampant use of fungicides on crops is contributing to the surge in drug-resistant fungi infecting humans. But let's check out this picture real quick. So this is a projection of the C. auris fungus on a microscope slide. It looks like nothing. This one looks kind of like a wiener, you know? But all right, cool. So here we have what looks like an outbreak list. Candida auris, a deadly drug-resistant yeast, is infecting critically ill patients in hospitals and nursing homes around the world. The fungus seems to have emerged in several locations at once, not from a single source. That's really weird, right? Wouldn't you be able to trace it back to a single mutation or something? How did it appear all at once? Kind of freaky, right? We're in a simulation. I'm kidding. But simulation theory is interesting nonetheless. So we can see it's popped up in Illinois, Indiana, Virginia, New Jersey, New York, California, Texas. I mean, these places have big cities. People are probably traveling a lot. You don't see it here because people kind of chill at home in middle America. Australia's got it. Well, let's just go down to the conclusion. Let's see what they're going to tell us. I actually went to the CDC like 2 years ago and did an interview about infectious disease and stuff. It was pretty fun. See, this is why I read the Daily Wire article, because this is huge. This is a huge article. I just want to read their conclusion. They say, resistance and denial. For now, the uncertainty around C. auris has led to a climate of fear and sometimes denial. Last spring, Jasmine Cutler, 29, went to visit her 72-year-old father at a hospital in New York City, where he had been admitted because of complications from a surgery the previous month. When she arrived at his room, she discovered he had been sitting for at least an hour in a recliner in his own feces because no one had come when he called for help to use the bathroom. Ms. Cutler said it became clear to her that the staff was afraid to touch him because tests had shown he was carrying C. auris. I saw doctors and nurses looking in the window of his room, she said. My father's not a guinea pig. You're not going to treat him like a freak at a show. He was eventually discharged and told he no longer carried the fungus, but he declined to be named, saying he feared being associated with the frightening infection. Scary stuff. But we can only hope that technological advancement will continually outpace disease. It's a cold war. The bacteria, the fungus, they're spreading, they're mutating, and they want to kill us. They actually don't. It's really bad for a disease to kill us. Their goal is to live in our bodies and get away with it without causing harm. But too often they do cause harm, so our bodies react. And if a disease kills you, it's actually a really bad disease. I was reading about what makes a disease really a good disease versus a bad disease. And there are a lot of viruses that infect humans that are asymptomatic. And that's a good disease. It's able to infect you, doesn't cause you any harm, and it can live without destroying its habitat, you. But then the bad ones are like this. They kill you. And then when you die, they die too. Not a good disease. Anyway, I'm going to end there. Stick around. I'll have another video for you tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. More videos, and I will see you then.